Hi, I'm Evan, and this is my Social Studies and English project. So I started out with this inquiry project, not knowing what in the world I wanted to do, whatsoever. So I thought, and I finally came up with an idea. So I worked on it, and then chucked it out the window, and restarted, and finally found a topic that interests me. What my project is about is the First Nations and Vikings. I want to show how the relationship was on Greenland, and how that helped or hindered both cultures. Exciting, right? Yes, I know this is going to be paid for 5 minutes. So, first off, you need to know that, yes, First Nations and Vikings knew about each other. They did interact with each other, but mostly very limited. The First Nations in now what is Upper Nunavut were very accustomed to the cold, harsh landscape, whereas the Vikings were not quite used to the area. Now remember, this was in the years 1000 to 1500 AD, so you couldn't just Google how to survive in Greenland, so the Vikings had it pretty rough. Not to mention during this time period, there was a mini ice age, so it wasn't exactly nice, easy green fields for farming. Most people think that the Vikings were savages, who roamed around killing and plundering for fun, wearing helmets with horns on them, with armor soaked in blood. Well, this gladly wasn't the case. Vikings, also known as Norsemen, were a nation of men and women, much like the Roman Empire. They expanded all over Europe and Asia, and for that they have earned some of the savagery that people claim that they have. The rest of it is Hollywood filmmakers making up nonsense, like the horned helmets which they supposedly wore, which they didn't. By this time, the Vikings mostly believed in Christianity, which also mellowed them out a bit. The conditions in Greenland, though, were closer towards the 1500s were terrible. Very inhospitable, but not impossible to live in. The First Nations had been living in that area for thousands of years with ease. But the Vikings wouldn't adapt. They could have, but they didn't, leading to their disappearance. Yes, they disappeared. The Norsemen of Greenland had a bishop. Basically, in this case, a man who taught Christianity, but was also in charge, using religion to ward off certain things like contact with the First Nations. The bishop would have seen the First Nations religion as evil or satanic, just because it wasn't his own. He therefore labeled it and them exactly that, and limited contact with the culture. Now, I know what you're thinking. What in the world was the bishop on? Well, keep in mind that these are the same people who thought the world was flat. So now you're thinking, okay, that doesn't affect either culture. Moving on to the next presentation, right? Well, no, that would be an incorrect assumption. See, by not interacting with the First Nations and not learning from them, the Vikings eventually disappeared. The Vikings mostly ate sheep and cattle, and in extreme cold, that's not a good food source, especially since they aren't even indigenous to that area. Yeah. They got their only food source shipped to them from Iceland. Smart, right? They would have been very prosperous civilization. They would have been a very prosperous civilization if they, 1, didn't use up their natural resources as fast as they did, and 2, learned from the First Nations. The Vikings starved themselves to death and disappeared. Now, I know you're probably wondering why I keep saying disappearance, right? Well, it's because there are graves in Greenland from the Vikings, yes, but there are no bones of them anywhere. I mean, poof, they're gone. There are no records of them leaving, nothing about going to Newfoundland, which they called Vinland. So you would think they died. Well, yes, but if so, where are the bones? Yes, there are some graves, but not enough to cover how many people live there. So I finally come to my conclusion, which is the Vikings hindered themselves into disappearing and dying by choosing not to learn from the First Nations and how to hunt fish and seal. And so basically the First Nations just sat back and laughed at the silly fools. Thank you.